business of today is introduce Cherie Blair, and it's a huge pleasure to do so. Of course, she's known to most of us as the wife of the former British Prime Minister, but she also is, without doubt, an inspirational figure in her own right. She's a formidable lawyer and a committed campaigner for women's rights. Just a bit of background, she studied law at the London School of Economics and was called to the bar in 1976. She became a QC, and that's definitely promotion for those who are not familiar with the legal, I think, in the UK, in 1995. And she co-founded Matrix Chambers, where she continues to practice as a barrister. And Matrix has built up an impressive international reputation with a focus on human rights and public law, and expanding scope into criminal, commercial, and EU law. In 2008, she set up the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women to help women build small and growing businesses in Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East, so that they can contribute to their economies and have a stronger voice in their societies. The foundation is about empowering and supporting women around the world so they can play an increasingly important role in their economies and societies. And working in partnership with local organisations, the foundation develops programs that build confidence and capability and capital in women. So, with great pleasure, Cherie Blair.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you all for inviting me here this morning. I know that the theme of the conference is inspiration, and we're asked, what inspires you? Well, I'm inspired just by being here with you all today, because when I look around this room, I see individuals, all of whom have got huge amounts to offer. Some of them just starting out on their journey, and some of them, like me, shall we say, midway. I also wanted to say to the two men in the room, Andrew and David, and I'm not forgetting, by the way, our two cameramen over there, please feel comfortable and welcome in this place. But don't make the mistake that many of us made in the 70s and 80s when they found ourselves the only woman in the room, and try and become like another woman. Please don't get into your kilts. Please realize that what's important in this life is diversity. So be strong, be your own inner men, because that way, together, we can contribute. And you too may get a chance to hit the top. So why am I a campaigner for women's rights? Well, the answer is obvious. It's in my history. I was raised by two strong women, my mother and my grandmother, both of whom left school at 14, and both of whom were absolutely determined that my sister and I should have the opportunities that they were denied to them. And so I went to the LSE, I did the bar finals, and I was one of those girls who put their hands up and always wanted to answer the questions. And yes, there were only 10% of us across the whole cohort qualifying for the bar in 1976. And I was the one who came top of the bar finals. And I thought, this is fantastic. I have proved that I can do all that has been asked for me. So let's start work. And then I realized there was a problem. The problem was something I really could not do anything about. The problem was I was a girl. And in those days, there weren't that many women at the bar. The bar is a profession of advocates. We are all self-employed, but to practice at the bar, you have to share your expenses and belong to what we call a chambers. So the first thing you do when you qualify is you have to serve a year's apprenticeship, essentially, in a chambers. And in those days, you would knock on the door, and they would say, but we don't take women in our chambers. Or some would say, well, we're very progressive, But we've got a woman, and we couldn't possibly have two, because what would happen if you both fell pregnant at the same time? This was a slight problem for me, because actually there was nothing I could do about the fact that I didn't have that Y chromosome. Fortunately, I did find a Chambers who were prepared to take me on. And I did my training. But at the end of the year of the training, it was said to me, well, Cherie, there's only really one vacancy here. And obviously there are two candidates. One is a male, one is a female. So we're obviously going to go for the male. We'll help you, as they did, find somewhere else. But obviously we're putting our money on the person who's going to build a career here and be here for the rest of his life. Well, I accepted that because that was the culture of the time. I was deeply grateful they found somewhere else for me to go. But I was conscious of the fact that there was something a bit wrong here, because actually that male himself acknowledged that I was the better lawyer. And indeed, it turned out that I was the better bet, because that man was Tony Blair. And 7 years later, he left the bar for some other career. 35 years later, I'm the one that's proved that I'm the one committed to the law. Now, of course, at this very moment as we speak, my poor daughter is going through those bar finals again, and she wants to be a lawyer as well, and the difference is obvious. 50% of her class, rather like as you were talking about the figures here, are female. When I was a young woman barrister, I didn't see another woman in court. I would go into court and they would fall silent and ask me whether I was the secretary. Now we know what female advocates look like. And though we still have a way to go, obviously, we only have one woman in the Supreme Court, we still only have 10% of our judges who are, actually I think it's 12% now, but whatever, who are women. We have come a long way, and we should celebrate that and be glad that today's cohort of young women lawyers know that actually girls do law, not just as an academic subject, not just as a way to fill in a bit of time before they're swept off their feet by the man of their dreams, but actually as a sustainable, invigorating career. But when I talk about our opportunities, and I look around the world, I realize, my God, we are lucky. Because there are millions of women across the world who look with wonder at what we now take for granted. It's a world, for example, and just a few examples from a very grim list. Women are twice as likely to live in poverty as men. 2 out of 3 illiterate adults are women. Not because they're not capable of learning, but because it's been deliberately chosen not to give them that opportunity. And less than 2% of the titled land in the world is owned by women. The assumption in so many parts of the world is that the property belongs to the man. Unless we think that's shocking, just remember that was the position here in our country into the late 19th century. But the consequences of these statistics are devastating for the women themselves, for their families, and for the health and prosperity of the entire society. And it's a tragic waste of potential, which inspires me to get angry and want to do something about it. One of the huge privileges of my husband becoming Prime Minister is that it opened up opportunities for me, which even as a QC, which I was by then, I wouldn't have had. And many of those opportunities involved going around the world. And when I went around the world, I always made a point of meeting, sometimes with lawyers, but always with women, and trying to talk to them about their experiences. Now, of course, I had some fantastic experiences, like Stevie Wonder singing Ma Cherie Amour for me at the White House. or getting to meet not one but two popes, not to mention numerous presidents. But the experiences that stay with me perhaps most were the experiences of meeting with extraordinary women across the world who were taking risks, sometimes literally with their lives, starting up NGOs, starting up businesses, going into politics, trying to express a woman's voice and a woman's personality in their country. You can't help but be moved and inspired to go to a place like Afghanistan, as I have been, and to see the amazing women who struggled through years and years to educate girls, and then to meet the young women, many of whom who missed out on a huge swathe of their education, now determined to catch up. Or to go, as I have done, to Tanzania and Uganda and Kenya and meet women entrepreneurs coming into World Bank programs that I was helping to launch and telling the stories of how they have managed to set up not just businesses of a traditional women's kind. You know, traditionally you think women's business, it's sewing, it's fashion, it's cooking. No, I'm talking about women who have their own lift companies, women who head banks in Africa, women who do waste disposal businesses, women who employ men in engineering companies. But nevertheless, those women, amazing though they are, face additional prejudices, getting access to credit, getting taken seriously by their suppliers and their customers, simply because, rather like they said to me in the 1970s, women don't do that. But they're determined to prove that women do. There's another example. Take Palestine, where obviously we go quite a lot as a family with my husband's jobs. In Palestine, what we are seeing is that girls are having education. And indeed, the number of women educated at degree level is now 54%. Fantastic, you think. But only 16% of women currently participate in the labour force. What is the point of educating women and then not allowing them to put that education to use? And I can remember talking with a group of girls in Nablus in Palestine who were just about to graduate and saying to them, what are you going to do next? And them saying to me, well, there's nothing we can do. There's no jobs here. The boys in our class are going to go off to the Gulf region, but we as women, Muslim women, cannot go on our own to the Gulf region to get a job. And one of the young women said to me, I'm thinking of taking up embroidery. And this was a girl who had done a business degree and had graduated in economics and finance. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm against embroidery, because I'm not. But I do think that possibly there are plenty of other women who could do the embroidery and not so many who can do the business and finance that this girl had been trained for. So that's why my foundation determined to help these women, and why we have a business centre, 2 business centres in Palestine, which provide practical business training for women. And let me tell you about one of them that we helped with business training, one of that cohort of girls, and who we also helped by our global mentoring program, where we match women entrepreneurs in different countries across the world who have been trained in business to a level when they have a concrete business plan they want to put into action, with men and women across the world who have business skills who want to help them realize their ambitions. With Google, we've built up an online, I sometimes call it my dating service, because we match the mentors and the mentees together, we train them in mentorship, and then we ask them to commit to a year-long relationship with deliverable aims. So Nahaya, incredibly successful at school, went to the university that I talked of, got a degree in biology. Then what does she do? Well, Nahaya had another passion. And rather than getting depressed, she decided to put that into action. She was a great cook. And she'd noticed when she was a student how really there wasn't many facilities for the students during their lunch hour. And so she decided that rather than them having fast food, she would set up a restaurant with traditional Palestinian cooking near the school to feed the students. Now, she started that business out of her own home kitchen. Gave her a small source of income, but she wanted to do a proper catering business and expand to other markets. We matched her up with Giles, who has a small manufacturing company in Birmingham. And he took her through developing her business plan, helped her identify the YMCA that gave her $5,000 capital grant. She set up that restaurant outside of her home. She employs 2 other people and is thinking of expanding even further. The nice thing about this story is that if Giles had lived in Palestine, he could never have done that, because a man could not have been alone in a room with a young unmarried woman. Over the internet, anything is possible. And the nicest thing was we launched, they were part of our pilot, and we launched our full mentoring platform last year in New York with the UNDP, who were providing many of our mentees, and Giles and Nahaya met for the first time face to face, and it was wonderful for all of us to see that meeting. Now, this venture isn't just good for Nahaya, it's actually good for her community. Because what we know is that if you invest in women, they plough that money back. They don't take it for themselves, they take it and give it back to their families and to the wider community. And some of you have probably know the OECD research, which shows give a development dollar to a woman, 90% of that money she will invest not in herself, but in the business, in her family. And the equivalent figure for men is sadly, you guys, not so good. I say sad because I have a great husband and I have 3 boys. And it saddens me to think that there's this contrast between them and apparently their sister, which, to be honest, I don't really see in practice. I put this question to a group of women that I was visiting. My foundation has a project in Kenya around Lake Victoria, NYASA project, where we support women who have been in a savings club but who have particular entrepreneurial skills, and we train them up using the mobile phone, which helps them do their financial transactions more safely and more efficiently, get market information more efficiently. And these women said to me, why are you helping us? And I said, well, obviously partly because of my own story, but I said also partly because everyone tells us it makes sense to invest in you. And so I said 90% is the figure. What do you think the figure is for men? And do you know what they said? 1%. Well, I want to assure you guys that they were wrong. It's not 1%, it's actually 30 to 40%. But the fact is, what they were illustrating was their experience of the men in their lives. And indeed, while I was there, I was accompanied by the Assistant District Commissioner, because I'm a sort of visiting dignitary. And I said to him, are you surprised to hear that? And he said, no. He said, you give money to the men, they'll go off and spend it on drink or on other women, or they'll run away. In fact, the women did say, we do have one man in our group. I said, oh, great. They said, he's disabled, so we know he can't run away. Now, I know something about that, because my own father not only abandoned my sister and I and left my mother, who, remember, didn't have a great deal of education, to struggle to bring us up on her own, he went on and had 6 other daughters, and he supported none of them either. So I would say that my father is a typical example of those 1% men. But I am angry on behalf of the men that I know and the men I hope my sons will become, who actually are as much 90% people as I am. And I want to say to the two of you, the four of you in this room, you need to join us and stand up and start saying to other men that this is not the way good men behave. This is not the typical man. And actually claim back the role for men to contribute equally to their societies and their communities, which somehow or other you've let these reckless men hijack. So, some inspirational stories for you, I hope. Unlocking the potential of women is vital to the future of our world. It's been identified as the 3rd billion that's going to make an impact in the world in the 21st century. Women coming into the economy is going to have more impact than the emergence of China and the emergence of India. And if we get it right, then the awards are immense. Not just simply in terms of the economy, but also in terms of society in general. An empowered woman with financial independence has the power to make choices. She has status in her family and within her community. She can have more control over her own bodies, deciding, as we know they do, whether and when to have children. Deciding and having more of a voice in their family so that they can say and insist that their daughters are educated. Deciding and having a voice in the wider community so they start standing for local government and indeed go on and become politicians. And as a result, we have choices and decisions made out of diversity of opinions, and they are, by definition, better, more imaginative, more likely to be creative and successful. So it is crucial that we involve women wholeheartedly in the building of today and tomorrow's society. And of course, next week is International Women's Day. It's a week yesterday. And we need to stand up and support and celebrate women and men who are tirelessly fighting for women's rights. This year, at 10:30 in the morning, I'm going to be at the Millennium Bridge, joining a campaign which is called Join Me at the Bridge campaign. Started by Women for Women International 3 years ago, started when the women of Rwanda met with the women of Congo in the bridge that joins their two countries. It spread across the world as women across the world come together to stand up for the power of women to bring peace and reconciliation into the world. After that, next week, I'll be going and speaking about mentoring in the Women of the World Festival at the South Bank Centre. All these are open to the public, so I want to see you there. Come and join us. Let's stand up and be seen to say, this is what inspires us. Women and men together standing up for a better world. Thank you.
Hi. What would be the best way to get involved in the mentoring program?
Well, we would love to have more mentors. We are now, the pilot had 30 mentors and 30 mentees. We are now up to 350 people on our mentoring platform, and they come from all over the world. We recruit new mentees every 3 months, and we've just matched a group, I think, in February. Our next matching session is in May. Before we match, you have to go through a training process. So this is a great time if you want to be a mentor to apply. What we're finding is that with our partners, because how do I identify the women? I don't do it myself, and we don't just say to women, do you want to be a mentee? Come in, because you have to be at the right level to benefit from this. So we partner with organisations like the UNDP, like Care International, like the Women, in what we now have 4 coming up to 5 business centres across the world. And we select the mentees that way. We then need to match them with mentors. And we match them really rather like a dating agency, looking at skills, looking at needs, looking at capacity. Come on, if you go to our website, www.CB Foundation, is it? Cherie Blair Foundation. You will see the mentoring page there. Just apply, and we would be delighted to have you. It's a great thing. It's a great personal experience. And what we found is that the mentors get so much out of it, which is really nice. The other thing is it's not just the mentor and the mentees. There are chat rooms and there are forums. So there are forums for the mentees, there are forums for the mentors, there are forums on subjects. There's a lot going on. And we monitor it. We have 3 people working on the website. So we check what's going on and help the relationships flourish.
We have one more question.
Hi, Cherie. I was wondering if you have any advice on what to do when returning to work after maternity leave. How long should you leave it? What did you do? And is it a good opportunity to change direction? Or should women even try to do some sort of study whilst on maternity leave? Or is that too much?
Well, listen, I would first of all say, don't whatever you do what I did. Because what I did was what I was saying to the men they mustn't do. Got my place in Chambers in 1977, fell pregnant in 1983. The only other person they'd ever had experience of being pregnant had left the bar at that point. So I was absolutely determined that I was going to show I could do both. So what did I do? I worked up to the very last minute when, in fact, the doctor had to sort of physically cart me into hospital and stick me in bed compulsorily with the threat of inducing the baby if I didn't stop working. I went back to work very quickly afterwards, staggering in, thinking that I was beating the system. Because I wasn't really. I was just reinforcing the system. I absolutely, passionately believe in the fact that maternity is important, that pregnant mothers need to look after each other, and that bringing up our next generation is a crucial role for men and women. And if we don't recognise that, and if we can't devise our work-life situation in such a way that makes that possible, then we're complete failures in life. So absolutely be grateful that in our country we have good maternity provision. We need to do so much more, of course, than merely have maternity provision. My kids obviously are much older now, though Leo is still only 11, 12. And I tell you, if anyone thinks that this problem is just about babies, they are very, very wrong. It's not just about babies. It's actually about parental responsibility throughout your life. And it's also about the responsibility you'll have later on in your life to your elderly parents. At least I certainly hope you will, otherwise I'm going to be in big trouble later on, aren't I? So we need to do more about flexible working. It's not so much about allowing women to take time off. It's a lot more about how do we keep them engaged and encourage them to come back. Now, I know that David's from Deloitte, and this is something that I know that you think of a lot. I'm sure you do too here in the London Business School, because what happens is so often out of sight is out of mind. And that's a waste for the companies, and it's certainly a waste for the women themselves. Having said that, of course, I think we've got to be realistic. And you do have to make choices. And I would say to everybody, you can't have it all at the same time, at least. Yes, you can have a family and you can have a career, but there are going to be times when the balance between the two of them is going to change. But just because the balance changes doesn't mean it's a once and for all decision. What really gets me angry is this idea that women have to take once and for all decisions, and that a decision they make at one set of their lives, probably in their, these days, late 20s, early 30s, to have a child, apparently disqualifies them forevermore from continuing to fulfill other aspects of their lives. At a time when we have a work span that's likely to go in, what now? Probably to our 70s by the time the young people in this room get to their retirement age. The idea that a decision you make, which, to be honest, is for a short period of time. You know, children are only babies for a certain length of time. The physical carrying of a child only takes a certain length of time. The emotional care of a child, of course, takes for the rest of your life, but that emotional care applies equally to your man as well. We have to do more to encourage flexible working, but sometimes it is the time to take a change, and sometimes we should be grateful as women, because the men, you know, your wife falls pregnant, oh my God, you know, perhaps you might, as a man, feel stuck in a job that you're not really inspired by, but it's bringing you in the money and you've got to keep going at it and work even harder. We at least have an opportunity to take stock and decide, is this the way I want to spend my life? And I think companies need to think about the fact that so many women actually come up with the answer no. Is it the women who are wrong? Or is it, in fact, the companies and the way they organise their business? Well, I'm sure we could discuss that forever.
Hi, Cherie. I'm Katie Cannon. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Women in Business Club. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. It's been brilliant. The Dean opened with a comment about why the club exists, and we're here to look at some of the reasons why women don't progress and think of good solutions and be part of that fix. And your comment about empowering those 90% men that are out there to reclaim the community contributions they want to make from the reckless 1% that has damaged their reputation speaks very loudly to the experience on an MBA where there are men who are not part of our club and don't feel necessarily welcome. And although it's very important, I know, to have days like today where we can be in each other's company and celebrate what we're achieving and look for our inspiration, I'm interested in if you have any thoughts or good examples in your experiences as to how to get men to the table.
I think this is a very interesting question. I mean, for a start, let's face it, women aren't all the same and neither are men. So, you know, we shouldn't assume that all women are the same and that what works for one woman works for another. On the other hand, I absolutely believe there is a place for a woman's space, for a woman's network, for women mentoring other women, for a place where you can sometimes just get together and talk about the things which possibly have more resonance with you than they might do with the men. But I think it's really important that it doesn't become a girls' silo, because then it can be marginalised. Because actually what we're talking about here is about diversity, and diversity isn't just about women. Diversity is about race, it's about sexual orientation, it's about disability, it's about allowing people to be who they are rather than requiring them to conform with who you think they should be, or even more, to conform with the precedent set by the alpha male at the top, some of whom have led their companies over the cliff as a result. Yeah, but we won't go there. So we need to have a woman's space, and I think men need to have their men's space. You know, there's nothing threatening about that, but we need also to have a place where we come together. Because in the end, what really works, what works in a family, what works in a community, what works in a business, is men and women coming together with mutual respect, with mutual dignity, and working together to complement each other rather than trying to change each other to comply with the norms of one.
Unfortunately, I think we don't have time for any more questions, so I'd like to just thank Cherie once again for being with us here today.
you.